This is Derrick Broze. This is Derrick Broze of the Conscious Resistance. I'm here in Standing Rock.
That man is wanted in 5 different countries: Chile, Argentina, Brazil.
We've been fighting a long time. We've all lost so very much. So many loved ones gone.
Don't you fucking tease that horse!
You are not alone. There are pockets of resistance all around the planet. We are at the brink. Above all, stay alive. You have no idea how important you are. If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network, and we are back for the next episode of my podcast, The Conscious Resistance Live. Tonight, we're going to be covering several stories, including the latest update in the Utah ritual abuse scandal, specifically relating to suspect David Hamblin and charges against him being dismissed. We're also going to be discussing Trump's latest pick for the CDC and her ties to the biotech industry. We'll also be covering my new article about Real ID, Trump's executive order related to voter ID and how that plays into digital ID. And then we're going to wrap up with an update on Homan Square, which I'm sure some of you out there remember, and I'm sure most of you have no idea what I'm talking about, but it's actually America's first, as far as we know, black site. Yes, those famous, infamous places that existed in the post 9/11 world where only terrorists got taken to, but in fact, Americans were being taken to this black site in Chicago back in 2015. It was first exposed, and there's been an update on that. So we're going to be sharing all about that. And of course, we'll probably talk about some of the ongoing situation with Trump and the whole deportation scandal, rounding people up, taking them to El Salvadorian prisons where there's violent gang members, even if they haven't been proven to actually have committed any crimes or to be a gang member themselves. Despite what the Trump administration is trying to tell you, these things are not above board and innocent people are being taken away. And as you guys can imagine, this is not something I support, and I think it's actually a very dangerous situation. So we're going to be covering all that and so much more tonight. And I'm really excited for this show tonight. First off, I do want to go ahead and just let you guys know, for those who haven't been following me on social media, if you don't follow me on social media, no worries. But if you do, you've probably already seen. But let me go ahead and start this and say thank you, big thank you to everybody who has been supporting the Pyramid of Power crowdfunding campaign. We actually just ended it yesterday, April 1st. Technically, we're still letting it run a little bit longer. If you guys want to support, you're welcome to do so. And we surpassed our goal. So thank you to the 191 people who donated via our fiat campaign over on Fundraiser. Our goal was $10,000. As of this morning, it's at 10,500. So after fees, that's probably about 10,200, 300 or so. Again, from 191 people over 23 days. So just in 3 weeks, we raised $10,000. I'm so grateful to each and every one of you. And also, we did have a Monero crowdfunding campaign over on Kuno. For those of you who use Monero, privacy coin, which I encourage you to learn more about. We had the same goal. We were aiming for $10,000 or 46.99 Monero. And we raised 12.5 as of this morning. Somebody donated late last night. And that comes out to being about, give or take, 1,700, 1,800 USD. 2,700 USD now with this latest donation. And that came from 24 people. So thank you again to everybody over there. So altogether, 24 people on Kuno, 191 over on Fundraiser. If my math is correct, that means we had more than 110, about 115 people donate to this, 215 people donate to this campaign. And we raised more than $12,000. And that is just, wow, my mind is blown. I'm so grateful to each and every one of you. And I shared a video yesterday on my social media, but in case you missed it, in the interest of full transparency, as I said when we were doing the crowdfunding campaign, 5,000 of that goes to my editor, and he has already been paid. I've already sent him the money. So he's been paid in advance for the editing he will be doing very soon. And the rest of the money I've set aside. I'm not going to be touching it. That $5,000 plus that we have there, that is going to be used so that we can produce DVDs, USB drives, and then a companion book. I want to turn all of my scripts into an actual book, which will take a little bit of editing, but not too much work. And so we can just continue to have this pyramid of power, this knowledge out there for people for years to come. I truly believe that this is going to be a project that I'm going to spend the rest of my life promoting. And based on the comments, both on the fundraiser campaign, I'll just show you guys that real quick. You can go to the fundraising link, and I will I'll put this in the show notes. And there's just some really, I'll say for me, they're super humbling comments and just the things that you guys have left on here, and not just stroking my ego, but literally just saying how the pyramid of power has helped you reach people and helped you and your family. And people donated everything from $5 to 100, 20, 250, 20, just some $28. All the funds have been appreciated and grateful. And I've loved reading these comments and just seeing, how you guys have benefited from the pyramid of power. So again, huge thank you guys. I'm actually taking a break from my writing right now to do this podcast right now, because I think there's some stories we want to cover. But as soon as I wrap this up, I'm getting back to my writing. I've been writing every single day. And I would say I am probably 50% of the way done with this project, maybe a little less. Maybe I'm being over ambitious, but I'm doing my best to highly focus on this. In between everything else going in life and, writing weekly for The Last American Vagabond, trying to keep up with current events and report that information to you guys. But also, as I said, I think the Pyramid of Power is going to be an evergreen, timeless project. So I've been really taking a break from most of my work to just grind. And so far, I've completed the big intro of it. I've covered the World Economic Forum, the Club of Rome, the Bilderberg Group, talking about the Trilateral Commission. That's what I'm writing on today. Synarchy, we talk about that. And then we're getting into the roundtable groups. And then from there, we get into the Freemasons, the Jesuits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I still got quite a bit of ways to go. My hope and my prayer is that I can finish it by this week and get it to my editor starting next week at the latest, but I'm just taking the time that is necessary to get this done. So realistically, I think the final episode of the Pyramid of Power, without putting too much pressure on my editor for this big episode, would probably be June of this year, June 2025. So thank you again to everybody who contributed to that campaign and who, has helped make all of my work possible in this area. And I'm going to keep doing everything I can to bring you guys hard-hitting, important information that hopefully you all value and find useful. So let's go ahead and jump forward now before we get into everything here. I want to remind you guys to bookmark my website, theconsciousresistance.com, theconsciousresistance.com. Guys, I cannot tell you how frustrating it is for me to have people ask me, Derrick, what's your website? Derrick, what's your website? And as I've said this before, I wonder, am I not doing a good enough job promoting my work? Because I've been on the Conscious Resistance since 2013. So 12 years now, going on 13 years. And some people still don't know what my website is. I write for thelastamericanvagabond.com, but if you ever want my podcast, you want all of my work, theconsciousresistance.com is the best place to do it. You can find out about all of my upcoming events, talks, and things I'm going to be giving. In fact, I'll share about that in just a moment. I am going to be doing some talks in a month or two. You can also find the 45-day exit and build challenge, which we recently released. I hope you guys will check that out. You can see, of course, right here on the homepage, our recent mini documentary on Peter Thiel. You can find the latest episode of the Activation podcast. You can find my conversation I did with Ian Carroll, which has been getting a lot of attention. You can find my recent walk and talk. And of course, on the desktop version, this doesn't apply for mobile yet. We are adding it to mobile, but you can find all of these categories breaking down my work into 5G, 9/11, Pyramid of Power, occult, finders, technocracy, etc. And you can find everything that I've been doing for the last decade plus there and get plugged in. And of course, you can sign up for my email list if you'd like to get updates on things I'm doing. So like I said, this is the page, theconsciousresistance.com/tour. You can find all the details for my upcoming events. I just spoke this past weekend in Mexico City. I'll probably be releasing an audio version of that talk. It was Spanglish between me and Miriam, which is really cool. And then in late May, I'm going to be speaking, doing a workshop at the Rise and Vibes Festival, which is like a music reggae festival. They have workshops in Durango, Colorado. I also am going to be going on tour for my music, but I'm going to save that announcement for now because I'm really excited and I want to wait till I've got all the details. And then in September, I'll be speaking at a vegan festival in Kansas called Thrive Alive Vegan Fest. And that's all I've got planned for right now because I'm working on my writing, and I'm going to be writing my memoir about my story of overcoming drug addiction in prison and things like that next. And then, of course, continuing to work on my land here in Mexico, the Conscious Agora, where if you've been following me on social media, you've seen I've got so much avocados, I don't even know what to do with it. I'm just eating so much guac right now because our trees are producing, which is a great blessing. And then here's the 45-day exit and build challenge. I'll put this in the show notes, but it's just theconsciousresistance.com/EXB. And if you want to go through here and check everything out, you can do so, get the latest info on the exit and build challenge. It actually looks like the page needs to be updated a little bit. It looks a little out of whack here, but nevertheless, you can find all the information, all the details. If you want to learn about exit and build strategy, how to do this holistically, this is the place to do it. So check that out. And yeah, let's go ahead now. So just one more reminder, if you want to follow all of my work, the best place to do so is always going to be theconsciousresistance.com. So let's go ahead and dive into our first story of the night. As I said, I'm focusing on the update in the ritual abuse scandal. I will remind you guys, you can go down here to theconsciousresistance.com. If you're on desktop, it will be out there on mobile very soon. And you can see all of our categories there. You want to look at Utah ritual abuse, click that. It's going to open up this page here, which covers everything that I've been reporting on since May 2022. So for the last 3 years now, when the Utah County Sheriff's Office announced an investigation into what they called ritualized child sexual abuse. This is their own words, and this led me to doing a 3-part investigation into the Mormon Church and former Mormon Church leader Gordon B. Hinckley, and another story called Justice Delayed, as well as Kate's story, which is a 2-part story of a survivor of ritual abuse. You'll hear more about that in just a bit. And I've just tried to do my best to follow this story, including recently with interviews with Cindy Metcalf of Relentless Hope, Goel, who is investigations into ritual abuse, and then recently letting you guys know that charges were potentially going to be dismissed against David Hamblin back in February, and unfortunately they did end up becoming dismissed against him. But now we have an update. The charges were not only dismissed against David Hamblin, but they were dismissed with prejudice, which means that they cannot be brought up again. Now, I'm going to read you guys this article. I'm not going to be rehashing everything I've covered in all of these dozens of reports here. So if you want some information about this, I encourage you to go back and start with my very first video on this. Look at update number 1, update number 2, the history of this. Look up this man, David Levitt, who's the former Utah County attorney, who's now remade himself living in Scotland with a castle and become an Instagram influencer with his wife. But both him and his wife have been accused of being involved in ritualistic abuse, which has been labeled satanic by some of the victims, alleged victims. And then we also got number 5 about the history of the Mormon Church itself. And then, as I said, you can see David Hamblin was finally arrested. You can look up Kate's story. And I'm really proud of the work I've done on this, not only because it's a disturbing, just messed up situation and that the victims deserve more support, but because this to me is what true journalism is about. You know, this isn't just rehashing what's out there already publicly. I've done my due diligence of diving deep and including this Justice Delayed investigation. That completely happened because of sources, people who reached out to me and said, "Hey, Derrick, you know, my family is in the Mormon Church. We've faced some abuse. I have this information." They sent me tapes of information that had never been previously released, including, as I said, a documentary about Gordon B. Hinckley, the former president of the Mormon Church, and abuse that he was involved in that hadn't been seen since the 1980s. And it wasn't even posted on the internet until myself and Ryan at The Last American Vagabond posted it. So we've been following this story for quite some time. And I will say I haven't reported on it in a few months. There have been others, including Goel and others, Goel, who have been staying on it more consistently. And I want to give them a big shout out and gratitude for doing so. Nevertheless, I'm back on the case, and this is my new article, Ritualistic Sex Abuse Charges Dismissed Against Admitted Child Abuser David Hamblin. Several charges related to abuse of a child were recently dismissed against David Hamblin. Let's see. Disgraced therapist David Hamblin, charges against him were dropped for the second time in the last decade. He was facing 6 felony charges of child abuse in Utah County after he was arrested in 2022 as part of the Utah County Sheriff's Office investigation into ritualized child sex abuse. In late March, 4th Judicial District Judge Roger Griffin announced that the charges were being dismissed with prejudice, which, as I said, means they cannot be refiled in the future. The charges against Hamlin were officially dismissed in February, but Judge Griffin took the last month to decide whether to dismiss them with or without prejudice. And he pretty much criticized the prosecution, the state, who was pursuing these charges against David Hamlin, for what he said was unusual. The case was, quote, unusual for the quantity and the quality of prosecutorial missteps, which he said, quote, amount to more than a lack of preparedness. Now, I don't want to get too lost in the weeds on this. Again, I encourage you guys to go back and read my previous reporting. But nevertheless, it's important to understand this case in a few different ways. The Utah County Sheriff's Office, they initiated this investigation. Arrests were made shortly afterward. Like I said, David Hamlin arrested in 2020. The investigation started May 2022. He was arrested about a year and a half later. Also, his ex-wife Roselle Stevenson was arrested as well, and she's similarly facing charges. But after that, the case has kind of languished and just not gone anywhere. And there have been people on both sides who've been critical and saying, well, the prosecution, they're doing a bad job on purpose, or the defense, David Hamlin's side, is trying to prevent him, the truth from coming out. There's been just a lot of this back and forth. And unfortunately, I think this is the reality when people try to bring up real charges against abusers, is that we don't really know who to trust. As I'm going to outline here in just a moment in this article, there are the judges, like I just quoted, he's saying like this is an unusual case because the prosecution's making all kinds of missteps. It doesn't even seem like they were ready to prosecute the case. And there's people who are being critical, including Goel, of the prosecution and the sheriff's office, saying that they failed to properly do their jobs. And in the sheriff's office is pointing the blame at the judge and saying that, well, the judge is lying. We did our job right. It's the judge that is, full of it and not doing his job. Whatever the case is, I think it's important to understand, guys, that the truth is not coming out. Like that's just, I guess, the crux of it at the moment. The truth is not coming out. We have pieces of the truth, and I'm going to report on some of that here. But as far as the truth coming out in a court of law and somebody like David Hamlin being charged and then prosecuted and the victims getting their justice, that's unfortunately not happening. Well, let's continue on here. As I said, the judge was calling out the prosecution. The dismissal comes after Hamlin and his team discovered, this is where it might get a little bit in the weeds, so follow with me. So David Hamlin and his team, they discovered that the prosecution had withheld an interview with the alleged victim, whose name is Emily Sheets, and they discussed slow walking, handing over the report. So during trials and prosecution, there's what's called discovery, where you get access to pretty much all of the evidence, all of the information that, both sides are supposed to give each other access to whatever they've got, so they can review it ahead of time and sort of be prepared in case they make it to court and they want to call witnesses. And in order to have a fair trial, which regardless of whatever David Hamlin is accused of, he is guaranteed the same rights as the rest of us. And, he's supposed to have a fair, quick, speedy trial and due process and all those typical things. What his prosecution was saying is that they kept requesting a report that was an interview with the alleged victim, and that the prosecution, in their own words, in their own writing, said that they were trying to slow walk the report and basically keep it from, do what they could to slow things down and to keep Hamlin's people from getting access to that. And as a reminder, Hamlin is a 70-year-old former therapist from Provo, Utah, who was held in Utah County Jail from September 2022 to March 2023, when he was granted a $100,000 bail. He'd been arrested and charged by the Utah County Sheriff's Office, and he was charged with multiple first-degree felony sexual offenses against a child. He was booked on 3 counts of sodomy of a child, 1 count of rape of a child, 2 counts of aggravated sexual assault of a child, and one misdemeanor count of lewdness involving a child. He was the first suspect to be arrested in this sheriff's investigation, which was investigating ritualistic child sex abuse going back to 1990. And as I said, so was his wife. And this was announced in 2021. And they said that, the investigation had originally began in April 2021. The investigation was announced 2022 publicly, but they said it had been going on in the background for a while, and that they were looking into a reports alleging, quote, similar forms of ritualistic sexual abuse and trafficking that occurred in Utah County, Juab County, and Sanpete County in Utah during 1990 and between 1990 and 2010. So investigating like a 20-year period of ritualistic sexual abuse. And now this is where we're going to get into the weeds. I actually did go ahead and download the court documents. They are linked here in this article. If you go ahead and click on this link, announce the charges were being dismissed with prejudice, you'll get to open up the court documents. And by the way, just a side note here, for those of you who support me on a monthly basis on Buy Me a Coffee or Substack, or who donate to my work, this is the kind of thing your money goes towards. Whenever I want to get court documents, I have to pay for access to Pacer, or in this case, to the Utah courts, database, and you get charged for every document you want to download or, print, things like that. And so just so you know, this is where the money goes to. And so this is the actual dismissal. You can see it was dated March 20th. State of Utah versus David Hamblin, ruling and order restates motion to dismiss, Judge Roger Griffin. It's 34 pages. I read through this entire thing for my report, as a journalist should do, and I quote from this directly. So everything that you're about to hear is straight out of the court documents. Judge Griffin offered harsh words for the prosecutors attempting to convict Hamblin. He said that Hamblin had alleged that the state was, quote, engaged in a pattern of slow walking discovery and preventing the defense from having a fair opportunity to challenge defense. The state did not produce a report, which Hamblin and his attorneys had been requesting for over a year, and they didn't produce it until just February 6th of this year. Hamblin and his team argued that the report in question related to claims of, quote, satanic sexual abuse accusations against David Hamblin from 2012. And just a little background for those who haven't been following my report on this or get maybe a little bit lost in it. David Hamblin was originally accused of abusing children way back in the early 2000s, but then he was arrested in 2012. That was the first time that he faced these same accusations. And similar to right now, after 2 years in 2014, that case was dismissed for similar reasons, where they were saying they were having trouble getting documents and this and that. And so after a while, as I mentioned, because of due process and constitutional rights, you can't just hold somebody forever indefinitely. If you're not going to take them to trial, if you're not going to charge them, you have to let them go. So he was let go. But the big thing was that in that 2012 case, you had multiple alleged victims, including his own daughters, which, by the way, he has admitted in a recording to raping his own daughters. And in those 2012 documents, which we have access to and we published them on The Last American Vagabond, this is like a 300 plus page report detailing some of the most horrendous and sickest things you can imagine: raping of children, physical abuse, murder, people involved in this abuse network, which is apparently inside the Mormon church. It's a satanic cult. This is what the victims allege. I'm just repeating what the 2012 documents allege, that there was a satanic cult within the Mormon church that was involved with abusing children. And this involved high-profile people, including the former county attorney David Leavitt, including David Hamblin, this disgraced therapist who just had the charges dismissed against him. And numerous other people are named in these 2012 documents. Again, these are allegations that have not been proven in a court of law, but these were the original victim statements against David Hamblin back in 2012. And they involve stories of, like I said, murder, the victims wearing the skin of the murdered people while raping the children, putting the children in boxes, claims of praying to Lucifer, all kinds of stuff. And I'm not even saying that this is 100% true. You take of it, make of it what you will. I'm just laying this all on the table. These are what the allegations were. And then back in 2012, the charges against David Hamblin are dismissed. And this just becomes, forgotten to the pages of history. Now in 2022, the investigation comes back. He's arrested, and then now charges have been dismissed against him. So this has been an ongoing case for quite some time. And the people who are in Utah, for one, I will say, those of you out there in Utah who are either Mormons or ex-Mormons, I understand you guys are very passionate about these stories, and you feel very strongly about this, whether you defend the church at all costs or you have your own experiences with abuse within the church. I'm not an expert on that. I've just been doing my best to continue to report on this case. But nevertheless, let's get back to it. So now that you have a little bit of that background, maybe you'll understand what's happening here. So Hamblin's team says that there was a report, an interview with the alleged victim that had to do with satanic sexual abuse allegations. And the prosecution claimed that the allegations of satanic sexual abuse were separate from this individual incident of abuse, which Hamblin had been charged recently with. Basically, the lawyers who were trying to prosecute David Hamblin were like, hey, look, okay, he's been accused of some satanic stuff, but that's separate from our case. We're just trying to charge him with these sodomy charges, lewdness with a child, etc. And as I write here, the reason that this is significant is because claims of satanic abuse are not taken seriously by the courts, and they are typically dismissed as the ravings of an unfit, unstable, mentally unstable individuals. And Hamblin's defense team argued that this association with claims of ritual satanic abuse was a, quote, key weakness in the case. So because there was apparently a report with an interview with one of the alleged victims which named or mentioned satanic abuse, and then the prosecution attempted to kind of keep that report from Hamblin's team, his team seized on this and said, look, we're being denied access to discovery. We're being denied access to all the information. This also has to do with some crazy claims of satanic abuse. This clearly is not a serious charge, so they motioned for dismissal. And the judge did grant that dismissal in February, as I mentioned, but then the judge was trying to decide if it should be without prejudice, which means the charges could come back later, or with prejudice. And the court stated that without access to the report mentioning satanic abuse, David Hamblin was unable to sufficiently argue his case. The judge wrote, quote, the exculpatory evidence corroborated that a ritual satanic sex abuse allegation was in fact directly relevant to this case. The judge also noted that according to the records, the allegations indisputably rely upon, quote, recovered memories that are of some age. And the judge wrote the following statement in relation to the sexual abuse charges against David Hamblin in 2002 and 2012. Quote, the case is rife with problems with evidence and discovery issues. These same sorts of problems also plagued a separate yet contextual case involving Hamblin in 2002. Both of those charges were dismissed back in the day as well. Ultimately, unfortunately, the judge found that Hamblin had credibly argued that the report contained evidence that could be fairly classified as exculpatory material. And since the prosecution did not produce this material in a timely manner, the judge found that they had violated the due process of law guaranteed by both the U.S. and Utah constitutions. And the judge noted that over 2 years, the state's own investigators, quote, expressed a hope to withhold exculpatory evidence or to slow walk its production to Hamblin's attorney before a preliminary hearing. Now, as I mentioned, the Utah County Sheriff's Office, the ones who initiated this investigation, they come back and they release a press release, which is also linked here, and you can read the full thing. And they say, quote, contrary to the ruling, the sheriff's office timely provided prosecutors with all evidence related to this case so that they could disclose it under the rules of discovery in criminal cases. And regarding Hamblin's claims of failure to disclose evidence, the sheriff's office said that they, quote, anticipated that the court would resolve these issues at an evidentiary hearing where investigators could detail the evidence that they had provided to the prosecution. Instead, the sheriff's office claims, quote, at no time were the investigators nor the victim given the opportunity to present any evidence to the court to refute the defense allegations of delay and improper withholding of evidence. The sheriff's office says that the lack of an evidentiary hearing meant that the judge was, quote, left to adjudicate these issues based on a one-sided presentation of these issues by the defense. And they also said that the report in question was provided to the prosecutors in 2022 and that the prosecution apparently confirmed this on February 5th. So they're saying, like, it's not true that you didn't have this report. We gave it to you. The sheriff's state, quote, the court also relied on a concern that the defense raised concerning certain statements made by the victim. This is the satanic abuse statements. But had an evidentiary hearing been held, the victim could have provided critical context necessary to resolve the issues raised by the defense. Again, neither the investigators nor the victim was ever given the opportunity to explain themselves or to address the defense allegations. So the sheriff are blaming the court, blaming the whole process. But then, as I mentioned, this gentleman, Goel, who I've interviewed back here, you can see this interview from last year, the latest in the Utah ritual abuse case. He actually posted in response to the sheriff's office on Facebook. I found a comment from him and he said, quote, if the sheriff's office did in fact turn over the reports and discoverable material in question to the first special prosecutor, Ryan Peters, it should have said so publicly when the defense first raised the allegation that those materials were not turned over. So he's basically saying, like, well, you guys failed to do your job. Like, if you did actually turn it over, why didn't you speak up till now? Why has there been silence from the sheriff's office this entire time? And I think that's a fair question. Now, David Hamblin is still facing felony charges of aggravated sexual abuse in San Pete County. And there's actually a hearing today as I'm recording this. And it may be that, as I wrote here, his team is likely to dismiss these charges as well, to move to dismiss these charges as well. We'll see, and I'll update you guys. But I would guess now that six charges in one county have been dismissed, his team is going to try to argue the same thing in San Pete County and say, hey, well, look, there's no more reason to keep him. These charges should be done. So he is essentially going free right now. And I want to share now just a quick video from Kate Talley. I mentioned Kate back here, guys. You can find Kate's story. Kate's story was released in, let's go ahead and open this up. I think it was 2022 as well. October 2022. You can go find this original interview I did with Kate. She was an associate of David Hamblin, the man we're talking about. She's the ex-wife of one of Hamblin's best friends, Eldon Talley. Her name's Kate Talley, or that was her former name, her ex-husband's name. And she shared her whole story here with me. I wrote an article about it for The Last American Vagabond. You can also see part 2, where Kate gets deeper into the ritualistic sexual abuse aspect of this. These are, of course, very sensitive topics, and they're not easy for people to digest. But nevertheless, it's important to listen to the victims. And as I write here at the end of the article, I'll just go ahead and skip ahead real quick. While we cannot prove these accusations for certain, we take serious the claims of ritualistic abuse, and we will continue to investigate these claims. So even though I can't go out there and verify for certain that the things Kate told me about being taken certain places as a young girl, obviously it's a little late in the game to be able to go verify that. But I do think we need to listen to people and hear their stories. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, as I said, we can prove them in a court of law at the moment, but they're worth hearing from. Now, we're going to take a quick second to listen to a message that Kate sent me. This is about a 5-minute long message. This is Kate Talley, again, an alleged victim of David Hamblin, based on her testimony, her story, which I believe, and this is her response to finding out that David Hamblin's charges have been dismissed. So check this out, and we'll be right back.
Hi, Derrick. Thanks so much for having me back. And thank you so much for covering the Utah ritualistic abuse situation that's going on. Let's talk a little bit about what happened with the dropping of the charges in the American Fort case against David Hamblin. I know it was shocking to a lot of people, but it wasn't super shocking to me. I wasn't really surprised. I was disappointed and saddened for victim ES, but I wasn't surprised. I think the last thing that officials in Utah want is to get David Hamblin on the witness stand, for that guy to hold a microphone. So I wasn't surprised, but I like I said, I was very saddened for the victim. Utah has some really horrible statistics when it comes to prosecution and conviction for sexual assault, child sex abuse, and rape. We have a 11.7% prosecution rate and less than 3% conviction rate. And it's my firm belief that the reason that it's that way is because of situations like Judge Griffin. I think they cover for each other. They cover up for one another. I was aware of that situation when I was a little child in the town that I lived in, and it's glaringly obvious now in our court system and in the news. The good thing that has come from this is that there's a lot more awareness around it now because of independent journalists such as yourself and others. Lauren Conlon in New York City has taken up covering the Utah ritual abuse situation, and because of that, because of the way that things have been grossly mishandled, it's now on people's radar where it wasn't before. So it's disappointing to have charges dropped, but the only reason that we've gotten anywhere in this is because of the public demands it. So there's a lot bigger presence and information in the public now So that's good. It's disappointing in one way, but it's actually really good, because I believe personally that the only way we're going to make any changes that are going to come about in Utah, it's going to happen because the public demands it. It's because victims speak up. It's because survivors want to make a difference. The powers that be in Utah have protected perpetrators for a long time, and the effects of the abuse, the incest, the ritual abuse, the sex abuse, and other forms of depravity in Utah, it's really starting to show up, and it's on people's radar now. So it's disappointing that this case was dropped, but I feel very hopeful that it's actually kind of backfired, right? They've kind of tried to keep it quiet, but instead they've kind of pushed it into the forefront, and it's because of journalists like yourself and the public who are seeking answers. You know, the recent arrests, shocking arrests, right, of Judge Kevin Christensen and the fire chief, Ned Brady Hansen, has really rocked a lot of people and woken a lot of people up. But this kind of thing is not new for Utah. It's not new. It's just that it's being shown. The truth of it is being shown. As a little child, I was trafficked to for sexual purposes to people who are high standing in the community, including peace officers, judges, policemen, civil servants. So it does happen, and it's been happening for a long time, and it's time for us to pay attention to it. So I'm hopeful. There's a whole bunch of us now that are standing shoulder to shoulder and speaking the truth about what has happened in Utah, and the cover-ups that have gone on in the church, in business, with therapists. It's a big old mess. But it's time for the light to shine on it, so survivors can heal, and more importantly, so children can be protected. So thank you again for covering this, and we'll see where it takes us. I think this is just beginning. We're on a mission, and we won't stop until truth is shown.
And thank you, Kate, for choosing to speak up. Truly, I appreciate you. And thank you for your strength that you've been showing throughout this entire time. Again, everyone, that was Kate Talley, who is a survivor of ritualistic abuse, and somebody who knew David Hamblin well via her ex-husband. I will put this all in the show notes, but of course you can go to theconsciousresistance.com, check out our category on Utah ritual abuse, and find this whole section, including Kate's story, part 1 from October 2022 and part 2 from November 2022. Let's go ahead and just look a little more into this article. Kate just mentioned the arrest of former Judge Kevin Christensen and former Tremonton Fire Department Chief Ned Brady Hansen. Both of these men were arrested separately for different incidents involving possession of child porn, but it's now been revealed that these two men had a sexual relationship with each other, and that while he was still serving as a judge, Christensen granted the fire chief bail after he was charged with attempting to sexually exploit a minor. And this lines up with what Kate is saying, that in her view, or in her experience, she has been trafficked to people of authority, police officers, peace officers, judges, etc., when she was a child. And here's the case. So back in late January, Tremonton fire chief arrested after allegedly sharing child porn photos and videos. Well, he ends up getting granted a bail by this judge, this guy on the left. Fire chief and judge who released him on bail had sexual relationship. So shortly after, the judge on the left, who's no longer a judge, and in fact, I'll show you in a second, he's in handcuffs now, thankfully. He is the one who granted this child abuser bail, the chief. And then it comes out later that the judge was also involved in child abuse, and then that they apparently were had some kind of homosexual relationship together, and that they were sharing their fantasies of abusing children together. And it's worth noting as well, as Kate pointed out to me, that this didn't come because the Utah authorities acted. This came from like a special investigation from the FBI that actually led this investigation, FBI and agents who were serving a warrant on the chief. And then they ended up finding out that he was communicating with the judge as well, and that the judge had been involved in this. So the corruption is at the highest levels, my friends. And this is why so many people have trouble trusting this David Hamlin case and whether or not real justice could have ever been done in the state of Utah, when so many people are involved in the Mormon church, so many people know each other outside of the courtroom. And it's just a really scary and disturbing situation. One final note here, as Kate said, more and more people are recognizing that this is a reality and more people are talking about it. Well, Utah just last week, actually on March 25th, officially passed a bill called HB 66 Ritual Abuse Amendments, and it was signed by Utah Governor Cox, which it's a bill that recognizes ritual abuse as a very specific aspect of child abuse and sexual abuse. So it requires current sexual assault and sexual abuse training for law enforcement officers to include training on sexual assault committed during a ritual. And if abuse is found to have a ritualized aspect of it, then there can be aggravating factors. Basically means they could be charged with more time if there's a ritualistic element to it. And this is because various witnesses have testified to their experiences of how the ritualistic element, whether you want to call it Luciferian, satanic, or just ritualistic in some other way, it has a particularly debilitating impact on the victims, and it's more traumatizing than you can even imagine. Now, look, let's just do a quick Google search of Utah passes ritual abuse bill, and I linked this in my article, and you're going to find that there's really nothing here other than November 20th when they first introduced the bill, 2024. There's one from Religion Dispatches 4 days ago called "What the Hell? Utah passes anti-ritual abuse despite ritual abuse not actually existing." And, there's been no updates. Like, you would think that this would be some big news, but it seems like certain people don't want the public to know about this. Now, I'm going to play another quick clip from a woman named Kara Baldry. Now, Kara was one of the women who testified, one of the victims who testified during the hearings for this Utah ritual abuse bill. And this is her testimony back in February. I have other links that I could show you. I'll pull one up in a minute, where the officers involved, including Sheriff Mike Smith and other deputies who were involved in the Utah County Sheriff's Office investigation into ritual abuse, they also testified in court at the House Judiciary Committee, Utah government, back last year. And I'm probably going to be cutting clips of those and putting those out there because there's some important testimony on there. But for now, let's check this out. This is Kara Baldry giving her testimony of ritual abuse and why she was in support of this bill that has now been signed into law in Utah. Check this out. We'll be right back.
My name is Kara Baldry, and I experienced ritual abuse. You will hear from valiant survivors today who have endured the horrors of ritual abuse and are some of the bravest people I've ever known. These practices have been breeding in dark, secret places in Utah. These parasitic perpetrators find absolute joy in torturing children, physically, emotionally, psychologically, and especially sexually. Ritual abuse is a war against our children. Our children are not freebies. There is very limited quantifiable data on ritual abuse because perpetrators' threats are so horrific and leave victims so incapacitated. The Utah Sheriff's Office Special Victims Unit has had over 150 tips of ritual abuse, and most of those have occurred in Utah. One research study from Germany of 165 survivors is jarring. 96% of victims were females. Most developed some form of a personality disorder. 75% were forced to use violence on others, and a mere 19% were able to hold any type of a job that's full or part-time. Perpetrators are trusting that victims will not be believed, and my own perpetrator would tell me I was invisible, which is exactly what it felt like. So I locked my abuse inside for over 3.5 decades and just disclosed small pieces of the abuse 2 years ago to my aging and very protective parents, which has changed our lives forever. As a young child, my perpetrator burrowed his way into my innocent life and was masterful and aggressive at the grooming process. I endured constant threats of him murdering me and my family if I didn't obey. So I obeyed, and I never said anything because I was trying to keep my family alive. Throughout the school year, my perpetrator would wait as my bus dropped me off for school in the morning, and he trained me to get in his car when no one was watching. He would then take me away for a few hours and drop me back off at school when he was finished. No one at my school ever called my home to ask my amazing parents any questions, and because I heavily dissociated, it was as if I put the abuse in a different box inside of me and couldn't find the key. Hopefully you can see how convenient this was for my perpetrator and for others. This evil man would sadistically assault me in inhumane ways, many times at gunpoint. Sometimes he would urinate on me after the abuse to remind me of my worthlessness and do things involving rituals and mutilated animals that don't leave a physical mark, but do leave profound psychological ones. He would make me hide and literally hunt for me and tell me that he was going to practice raping me. He would call upon unknown dark beings in exchange for their power. I was told I was Jesus' whore and that I was God's mistake and I was made wrong. As a result, my whole life I have struggled believing I matter and thought everything about me was backwards and wrong. He said he liked raping me because there was no chance I could get pregnant since I was just in second grade. He made me beg for horrific sexual experiences and then thank him. I know this is so hard to hear, and I am grateful your role is to hear me today. I am speaking the truth. The aftermath consequences have been ongoing and oftentimes excruciating. You can imagine what happens to your body when you are scared to go to sleep for decades. It isn't surprising that many survivors choose to die by suicide rather than holding space for these monstrous memories in shattered minds. All aspects of my life have changed forever because of one evil man who is free today and probably hurting many, many others. I have worked really hard in my healing journey, and Jesus has been my best friend in this process as he has helped me rewire my thinking and make peace with my past. I have forgiven my perpetrator. This is the 5th time I am testifying of my abuse for this bill. Please help me pass it. I hope that injustice caused to anyone is a threat to all of us.
All right, so that was Kara Baldtree testifying in February in Utah about the recently passed Utah ritual abuse bill, which obviously, as you heard there, she was testifying in favor of. Like I said, I'm going to put all that information in the show notes. You can go to theconsciousresistance.com. I encourage you, if this is a new topic to you or it's something that you have interest in and you want to help expose, dig deeper into that. I will have more to share on this entire case, specifically related to David Levitt. I don't want to say too much right now, but I'm working on finding a whistleblower who seems to have kind of disappeared at the moment, and his story is extremely important. So stay tuned. There will be more to come on that. Let's go ahead and move to our next story related to Trump's recent executive order about voter ID. Now, I've been warning you guys for a while, and I tweeted this actually yesterday. Maybe I should just pull that up real quick. I'll go pull that up. I have been warning people for years that this immigration talk, the border talk, it's not that it's not a real issue. Yes, it's true that there are horrible government policies that typically come from progressives that let people out of jail and prison whenever they've been, involved in all kinds of horrible crimes, and they just act like it's no big deal. That's a fact. And at the same time, there's also, here, let me pull this up. There's also people who are pushing for open border policies, which have led to bad outcomes. That's a real thing. I'm not trying to downplay that that's a real thing. What I am trying to say, and what I've been trying to warn people for years, is that this was being done on purpose. This is how the predator class operates. They play both sides. This is the Hegelian dialectic. This is the false binary that they put you in. And so they allow a problem to fester or to get to the point that the people are like, please save us, do something about this. And then what is the solution? More militarization of the border, more rounding up of people and deporting people to other countries, whether they were guilty or not. And then, of course, well, we got to stop all the illegal voters, so we got to pass a voter ID. And voter ID, I'm not saying that people shouldn't ask for ID, but you could use just an old, normal, typical ID that we've had for generations. But what's really happening is this part of a push towards digital ID. This is what I tweeted yesterday. I've been warning people for years that the growth of the police state would be to use immigration as an excuse to bring militarization into the homeland. Now we're seeing it. Here's some of my reports over the years and solutions. And this is one from a couple years back. The fight against immigration welcomes the police state. Mass surveillance on the border is meant for Americans. What Dave Smith gets wrong and right about libertarianism and borders. That's a report I did last year. And then some solutions. I talk about the freedom cells idea applied to immigration raids and how we could protect ourselves and our friends and family from these gang members. And then this is how you stop a government kidnapping, showing an example of a community coming together to protect one of their own from kidnapping. And then this one was written by Don Villa, contributor at the Conscious Resistance. Trump's immigration crackdown only empowers the police state. This is the message we've been saying for years. So now here we are, and Trump is passing executive orders, a new executive order, which he signed on March 25th, so just about a week ago, called Preserving and Protecting Integrity of American Elections. And as I outline in here, this executive order is aimed at securing U.S. elections after years of claims of widespread voter fraud and illegal voting. And as I say here, while there does exist some element of truth to these claims, they are being exploited to push the U.S. closer to requiring digital IDs, not only for voting, but for daily life. And the executive order states that, quote, the U.S. fails to enforce basic and necessary election protections employed by modern developed nations. And it highlights how nations like India and Brazil are tying voter identification to a biometric database. I'm sure that's something Trump and his team want. And although the executive order does not explicitly mention the U.S. having a database yet, that is absolutely part of the long-term plans. And the executive order outlines what qualifies as documentary proof of U.S. citizenship, including an identification document which is, quote, compliant with the requirements of the Real ID Act of 2005 that indicates that the applicant is a citizen of the United States. For those who don't remember, the Real ID Act was passed in 2005 after a recommendation by the fraudulent 9/11 Commission in the wake of the 9/11 attacks. Many U.S. states have resisted implementing the Real ID measures for the last 20 years. However, that's all about to be coming to a conclusion, and every state is now expected to be in compliance with the Real ID as of May 7th, 2025. So less than, or just a month away. And in January, 1 week before Trump returned to the White House, the TSA published the final rule for enforcement of Real ID compliant ID cards. Beginning on May 7th, Americans attempting to board commercial flights or enter federal buildings will need to display state-issued driver's license and identification cards that meet the security requirements established by the Real ID Act. Former TSA Administrator David Pekoske said, in January, Congress passed the Real ID Act in 2005 to enhance security standards for ID directly in response to the security vulnerabilities highlighted by the 9/11 attacks. Identity verification is foundational to security. And one form of Real ID compliant identification, because just to be clear, you can go to like anybody who's gone to the DMV or whatever you got in your state and gone there recently to get a new ID, you've probably noticed that you might have a new ID that has like a little star on it or some kind of mark on it, or like a hologram on it that makes it clear it's different than your usual. It might, for the most part, look like a standard ID, but it has deeper tools in it that are supposed to, prevent counterfeiting of IDs and just make it more able to prove whether or not it's real, right? So it makes it harder to fake identification cards. That's just the standard thing. But the other big thing that I've been warning for a while that they're promoting is called mobile driver's license, or MDLs, or simply a digital driver's license. Now, this is where it all starts to come together, where Real ID and the mobile driver's license and digital ID come together. Mobile driver's licenses are digital identifications stored on a smartphone, which that's kind of part of the problem. Maybe you might consider getting rid of the smartphone. Digital IDs stored on a smartphone, which typically include the same information as physical driver's license and ID cards. At the moment, not all mobile driver's license are compliant with the requirements of the Real ID, but the TSA is giving a waiver to certain states to allow residents to continue to use mobile driver's license. And these are rolling out across North America in 3 common forms, including proprietary apps, which are owned by the local, state, or national governments, various state-approved apps like Smart ID, and Apple Wallet. These are kind of the ways they're allowing people to include their IDs. And as I've been warning you guys for years, this is part of the push towards one app to rule them all. Elon Musk has his idea about turning X into the WeChat of the West. And WeChat is, of course, the Chinese app that basically everybody gets on all the time, and it has access to everything. It's got your credit card information, it's got your health information, it's got your banking, it's got everything in one single app. It's so convenient, so useful. But this is also the beginning of trapping people within this digital mainframe. And so we need to resist this where we can. According to a guide about digital driver's licenses, users will open their chosen app, scan the front and back of their physical driver's license, and then verify their identity with a selfie or similar biometric data, something very similar to what appears to be already starting on Twitter. Once verified, the user can begin using their digital ID app as they would a physical ID card. So you got to get your physical ID, scan it with your phone, and it confirms that information, take a picture of your face, and then boom. And then when you go out, you can just show them your phone and look, here's my digital ID. According to government technology, at least 5 million Americans have already signed up for mobile driver's licenses in 11 states that have interoperable programs fully implemented. GovTech determined these figures using public records requests, and they also note that at least a dozen other states, including California, are already conducting pilots or will soon be launching their own mobile driver's license programs. GovTech notes that states like Iowa, Colorado, and Utah have partnerships with businesses and government agencies to accept their mobile IDs. And these businesses, this is the interesting part, is the businesses which have the highest rate of adoption are those which serve or sell products like liquor or cannabis. And I found that to be interesting because, well, potheads want their weed, and alcoholics or people who like to drink, they want their liquor. So if you go into a store and they're like, sorry guys, we can't sell you your weed or we can't sell you your booze anymore unless you get this mobile driver's license, this digital ID. My guess is that most people are going to comply because they don't want to miss out on having their daily drink or their daily joint that they love to have. And that's just another way to squeeze this. I've been telling you guys this since 2019 when I wrote my book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, that one of the ways they're going to squeeze you into this system is through convenience, entertainment. So that's why one of the first places they started testing out facial recognition and this sort of thing was football stadiums. And actually, I had a friend tell me the other day he went to a baseball game with a friend, and that there was literally no way, baseball or basketball, there was no way to get into the stadium without some sort of digital, scanning of your ID and of the ticket. So they're already testing these things out, and I feel like they understand that sports games and getting weed and alcohol, these are the kind of people that for the most part are just going to comply because they want to get in and they want to enjoy whatever. They're not going to be very questioning. Other businesses that are accepting mobile driver's license, including credit unions, security firms, real estate companies, auto body shops, and healthcare organizations. Back in May 2021, the American Civil Liberties Union discussed efforts to mandate digital driver's license. And in a report titled Identity Crisis, they warned that the use of digital driver's licenses, quote, raises the danger that there will be no balanced assessment of the costs and benefits of such a system, and that we will adopt systems that do not strike the balance between the right balance between the needs for identification, security, and convenience, and Americans' well-founded aversion to government and corporate surveillance and regimentation. Jay Stanley, who is a senior policy with the ACLU's Speech, Privacy, and Technology Project, said that the switch to digital IDs would have big implications for American life. Quote, if not done right, digital driver's licenses could be disastrous for privacy, increase inequity, and lead to pervasive ID checks in American life, including on the internet. That's another big part of what this is coming back to, my friends, on the internet. They want there to be an internet ID where you can't get online, you can't access information without proving who you are. And that is a dangerous step in the wrong direction. This is why we must resist digital IDs in all fronts. In June 2022, the Center for Human Rights and Global Justice at NYU School of Law issued a 100-page report detailing the growing dangers of reliance on digital ID around the world. The report was titled Paving a Digital Road to Hell, and it examined the role of the World Bank and other international networks that have been promoting digital ID for years. They point a finger at the World Bank and ID4D initiative, which is a program which was received a catalytic investment from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the OMDR network, as well as various governments. ID40, you should know about that, the World Bank. And the report from NYU says, quote, "We have noted that the World Bank and its ID40 initiative do not stand alone in pursuing the digital agenda. They exist within a global network of organizations and individuals. In addition to governments like the UK, US, and France, philanthropic organizations and banks are also part of this, and the NYU report also points a finger at private biometric corporations like IDEMIA, Thales, and Gemalto. And I've previously reported on the role that the Thales Group is doing in advancing digital ID in both Mexico and the United States. There's a link to that report right there. Finally, digital ID and facial recognition. This is how these things tie together. With compliance with the Real ID Act, while compliance with the Real ID Act does not currently require digital ID, mobile driver's licenses are the first step in that direction. In fact, the TSA has already got a page on their website where they make it clear that they are willing to accept digital IDs from states which have begun to roll them out, and they offer a convenient map to highlight the states which are using digital IDs. And here's a little video. I'll just play it. We're not going to listen to the audio, but this is just the TSA's website showing us how convenient. Look, I've got a digital ID. You just walk up, show it to the friendly, helpful TSA person that totally doesn't hate their life and will never be rude to you. And you get to walk in and fly. And this is what freedom's like. This video is titled TSA Digital ID is Here. This is not far off, my friends. The TSA's website says, use your smartphone for identity verification with digital identity solutions like mobile driver's licenses or ID passes now accepted at TSA checkpoints through platforms such as Apple Wallet, Google Wallet, and Samsung Wallet or a state-issued app. So for the moment, Americans have 4 options for presenting ID. You can tap or scan a digital ID, you can show a driver's license, state-issued ID, or a passport. Passport is personally the only type of ID I have. But it's worth noting that at the same time the TSA is accepting mobile driver's licenses and real ID compliant IDs, they are also testing out biometric facial recognition cameras at international terminals across the United States. In fact, the TSA's own website says TSA officers now use biometric cameras to assist them with identity verification. This photo is optional. They also claim that all the photo and personal data are deleted after verification. And while they're saying this is currently optional, anybody who's flown recently, especially international, guys, if you've seen this, there are no signs. If there's any signs, I've seen 1 or 2, they are not well placed where you can see them. So the average person, especially those who've been trained well during COVID-19 84, they have no idea that they can say no. So you walk up to the terminal, like you walk up to your flight, you're getting ready to leave, right? And in that process, they might have like a little tablet on a stand in front of you, and when you would typically hand them your ticket, they'll just tell you, okay, go ahead, look here. And most people just walk up obediently, put their face there, it scans them, and then they get to go. What I recommend you do is step to the side. Don't step in front of the tablet. Make it very clear, like, here you go, here's my thing. And if they ask you, say no, thank you. You have that right. The more people who say no, thank you, we might be able to avert these things from becoming mandatory. But if we don't even try to resist them because we're afraid, because it's convenient, blah, 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 whatever, it's going to get worse. So if you're flying, just like you should be opting out of the body scanners, and I know they're going to grope you, and that's not a good thing. But if more and more people were resisting these things and pushing back, instead of it just being me and Miriam or a couple of people in line, because when we do it, 98% of the people are going ahead and advancing through and just doing the facial recognition, doing the body scanners. If we don't push back, my friends, it's going to get worse. And as I said, they're going to test this out at sports stadiums, the airport, places where people are kind of like, you want to make that flight. So you're kind of like, I don't know, I don't want to say no and then miss my flight or be late or whatever. And they know that. So they're testing it out on these places where they can squeeze us. And this is where we need to push back the most. So let's continue here as we wrap this up. While this is currently optional, as I said, the TSA has received pushback for not adequately notifying the public. And in fact, former TSA Administrator David Pekoske, he actually admitted that the government's long-term goal is to make biometric scanning mandatory. In early February, the DHS's Inspector General announced an audit into the TSA relating to the use of facial recognition technology after a bipartisan coalition of representatives sent a letter making a formal request for an investigation. And this came because the lawmakers note that 2 years ago, in April 2023, Former TSA Administrator Pekoske, he was in Austin, Texas for the South by Southwest conference. And during the talk, he said, quote, "We will get to the point where we will require biometrics across the board." So despite them claiming that this is all optional, they're already making it noted that this is going to be mandatory at some point. And Wired Magazine recently acknowledged that digital passports and facial recognition are rapidly expanding and represent a threat to privacy. Wired Magazine wrote, quote, "While ending frustrating airport lines would be welcome for many, the shift to digital travel document also raises concerns about how data is protected, a normalization of problematic surveillance technology such as face recognition, plus whether digital ID systems will be rolled out to other parts of society, and who ultimately controls or builds these pieces of infrastructure." And the dangers of facial recognition are not new. As far back as 2019, the Georgetown Law Center for Privacy and Technology released a report titled "America Under Watch: Face Surveillance in the United States." And I've been warning about this since back then, that Americans need to be paying attention to the rise of facial recognition technology. And I go into this a little bit further about digital IDs and how this is all part of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. They're trying to teach people that having a digital ID is a human right. But finally, what I wrote here is that although many people believed a Kamala Harris presidency would all but guarantee the expansion of dangerous programs like digital IDs, I warned before the election that no matter who was president, the infrastructure was already in place and that these schemes would expand. With Donald Trump promising to secure elections by aligning with the goals of the Real ID Act of 2005, we are ensured to see an increase in calls for making digital ID mandatory. And in fact, Trump continues to call for a biometric entry and exit system as the solution to fighting illegal immigration, making it clear that some version of digital IDs backed by facial recognition will soon be the norm in the United States. And of course, if you guys want solutions, I always recommend download my book, How to Opt Out the Technocratic State, or listen to the free audiobook, which you can find at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. And I wrote this book in late 2019, published January 2020, right when COVID came about. And of course, COVID helped expand the push towards digital IDs with vaccine passports. The book was updated in December 2022. If you want some ideas on solutions, I encourage you to check that out. And of course, my article you can find at thelastamericanvagabond.com, Real ID, Voter ID, and Digital ID, the Future of American Identification. It will, of course, be in the show notes as everything. But like I started out saying, the immigration issue is a real issue, but they are playing you. This is how they get us. They put us in between a rock and a hard place. So what is the answer? Do nothing? You know, because some people say, well, what do you want us to do, Derrick? Don't do anything. Let all the illegals run over the country. Let violent gang members come in here. Let people vote whether or not they're American citizens. No, that's not what I'm advocating for. Personally, I'm an anarchist, and I think that government shouldn't be in control of borders in the first place. I think the only thing you can control is your own private property. And but I know that we're far away from that world. And so I understand that, but I'm not in favor of increasing the power of the state because some of you are afraid, especially when, like I said, there's a lot of false claims out there about voter fraud and about illegal voting. Yes, it does happen, but every single case, just as one example that Trump brought to that his team, Sidney Powell and all these other people about the election was thrown out of court. And you could argue, well, that's just because the deep state, blah, blah, whatever. Or you could just recognize that those claims that they raised a lot of money off from desperate people on the right wing and the MAGA crowd, most of them were false. Now, that doesn't mean that voter fraud doesn't happen and can't happen. This is another reason I don't trust voting. The voting machines, Diebold voting machines can be hacked. The answer in my mind is, sure, ask for an ID, but not a digital ID. Use the good old plastic card if somebody wants to verify themselves. And then at the same time, we could not militarize the border, right? How about we actually have sensible border policy if we're going to have a border at all? And again, I'm saying this as an anarchist who doesn't really believe in borders, but I also understand that there are insane people who will weaponize immigration to try to achieve what they have now. This is what they want. They want us to be at a place where, like, please, daddy government, mommy government, big sis, big bro, save us from the horrible immigrants. They're the problem. And it's just another trap, another way to further divide the population against themselves instead of recognizing that the people at the top of the pyramid are the real problem. So don't fall into that trap, my friends. I know it's a complex situation. It's not easy, but it's not as black and white as people would like you to think, that, oh, the immigrants are the problem. We just need to round them all up and get rid of them. Or we just need to have digital ID and everything will be great. We can fix the elections. That's not the goal of these people. It's to build the technocratic state that I've been warning about for years. All right, we're going to go to a quick break and thank one of our sponsors, the Above Phone. We'll be right back.
Are you using your phone, or is it using you? Rise above mass surveillance and discover a phone that protects your privacy and communications.
Above Phone does everything your old phone does, without tracking you, while giving you complete control over your phone and apps. We are better than big tech. It works with any cell service. No forced logins, no advertising or tracking. Download apps privately. Control your phone and its apps with secure hardware. Introducing Above Suite. Protects your internet traffic. Private email on any device. Video call with friends privately. Encrypted chat, calls, and internet phone. Protect your searches and get results. Don't worry if you're new. Every phone includes a free 45-minute live call. You also get free email and chat support, free guides and video courses. We can take back our technology. We're here to help with tools and education. You have the power.
Rise above with Above Phone.
AbovePhone.com.
All right, welcome back. That was, of course, the Above Phone. I want to mention, just in case anybody out there does want to use a smartphone, the Above Phone is the only company that I support. It's by my friend Hakeem Anwar, who I've known for several years and I trust. I want to let you know, if just in case you are interested, I will drop the link, but it's in the show notes wherever you're watching. It's also in an ad on, there's an ad on the side of the website, theconsciousresistance.com, abovephone.com. And use the code DBROZE50 if you want to get a discount on that. DBROZE, my first initial and my last name, DBROZE50. And as I said, I'll drop the link in there for you guys to check out. So let's go into our next story here relating to Trump's pick for CDC head. Let's check this one out. All right. This was kind of like a big story last week, and there was some confusion going on. This woman, Susan Monterez, has been nominated to lead the CDC. And as you can see in this article from the New American, Trump nominates biotech insider Susan Monterez to lead CDC. Now, it was interesting because when she took over the CDC, you know, they changed from one person to the next. And so all of the social media accounts, they become adopted by the new person. And unfortunately, when that happened, all of the previous person under the Biden administration who had been endorsing the vaccines and promoting the vaccine, now Susan Monterez, her name was on them. So a lot of people mistakenly tweeted saying, hey, look, she's been promoting the vax. I was one of those people, and I deleted it as soon as I realized. But that doesn't mean there aren't real concerns for her. So in case you're seeing stuff about her promoting vaccines, she may have been promoting vaccines, but I searched and looked, and I couldn't find anything about it. Especially not on the Twitter stuff. That was, like I said, a mistake. But the bigger concern is her background coming from biotech, coming from ARPA-H. So Trump has nominated Dr. Susan Monterez, currently the acting director for the CDC. Now she becomes the CDC's director. This was after Dr. David Weldon, who was the previous nominee. He stepped aside because they were worried about his anti-vaccine stance. And apparently he didn't have support in the Senate. Monterez, though, she has raised concerns among those who believe the CDC has strayed from its mission, particularly the, quote, Make America Healthy Again movement. Critics argue that her extensive background within the federal health bureaucracy and a heavy focus on technology-driven biosecurity suggests a continuation of the status quo rather than long overdue reform. She comes from Stanford as well. Not to say that every person at Stanford's bad, but that's where a lot of the Peter Thiel acolytes and the big tech comes from. So it's not that surprising to me. Trump acknowledged that Americans have lost confidence in the CDC, blaming political bias and disastrous mismanagement. And he said that bringing in this woman would be, you know, a way to fix things. And even RFK, he kind of came out and he had to defend her after a lot of people started calling her out. RFK had to get on Twitter and say, hey, some of you are attacking our new pick. We chose her because we know she's going to do a great job. But here's a little bit about her background. According to her LinkedIn profile, she has nearly 2 decades of experience in senior roles across federal health and national security agencies. Since 2022, she has been a deputy director at the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, ARPA-H, overseeing its $2 billion portfolio focused on high-risk health technology projects. Now, for those who don't know, ARPA-H, I reported on this, Whitney Webb reported on this. This was sort of the health version of DARPA, and it came out of another organization called BARDA. But for those who know DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency within the Department of Defense, these are the people who come up with biotech, robot dogs, drones, all kinds of the cutting edge, scary and interesting technology. Well, this is the health version of that, ARPA-H, Advanced Research Project Agency for Health, which has a $2 billion portfolio focused on health technology projects. Now, I'm not against technology inherently. I'm not against using cutting edge stuff if it's going to help. But the concern is that many of these technologies play right into the transhumanist agenda, things like mRNA technology, biotech, what they call synthetic biology, and this sort of thing. Prior to that, Moneras led the Office of Planning, Analysis, and Evaluation at the HHS's Health Resources and Service Administration. And there she founded the Center for Innovation, managed $2 billion in healthcare funding, including the CARES Act and telehealth expansion. Telehealth is a big part of the problem too, because we saw that during COVID when they locked everybody down. They want everything to be further digital. You don't need to go see your doctor in person. Just do it all through digital means. From 2016 to 2018, she was the Deputy Assistant Secretary at DHS, and she led biodefense efforts, advising the National Security Council on emerging diseases. And in 2014, 2016, she was in the White House for strategies for pandemic response. So that's kind of interesting. Earlier, back in 2006, 2009, she helped shape Project BioShield at HHS's Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, or BARDA, like I was talking about a moment ago. The research aimed to develop countermeasures against chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. She also served as a science and technology policy fellow at the American Association for Advancement of Science. So she's got a lot coming from the biodefense, biotech, biohealth region, which is a big part of the COVID agenda that we witnessed. The most significant criticism stems from her role at ARPA-H, which, as I mentioned, originated as HARPA and was related to BARDA, the Health Advanced Research Projects Agency coming out of DARPA. This idea was first floated during Trump's first term, and it was framed as a bold leap in biomedical innovation aimed at preventing mass shooting. And Whitney's talked about this, like the connections with HARPA and tracking, having this kind of pre-crime program that was going to stop mass shootings. I encourage you to look more into that. They proposed Safe Home Project, which would have used consumer devices. These devices would monitor behavioral health signals. The goal was to provide early warnings for mental illness or violent tendencies. Critics saw it not as a public health innovation, but as a blueprint for domestic surveillance and pre-crime. When the Biden administration, with congressional approval, formally launched ARPA-H in 2022, the branding changed, but only slightly. They didn't even bother with a new name. They simply moved the H to the back. So it went from being HARPA, which was something that was discussed in President Trump's term the first time, to then something that Biden brought in 2022. And this is exactly how this stuff works, guys. One administration, one party will suggest things, and then the other party will come along and advance it while they got you arguing about other things that might not be as relevant. The agency was billed as a pivotal component to Biden's Cancer Moonshot initiative, which also involved mRNA vaccines, which coincidentally Trump is bringing back now under the Stargate project. The core model remains intact: aggressive government-funded R&D in areas deemed too speculative or risky for traditional pharma. The agency heavily focuses on artificial intelligence, bioinformatics, vaccines, as well as genomic vaccines, wearable technologies, etc. And transhumanism, this is again the major concerns. Her critics signal that she is part of a deeper drift into the centralized biosecurity state. Some critics calling her a transhumanist because of her focus on neurotechnology, biosensors, implantable devices. Now, again, like I said, these things can be useful in some ways, but many of us are concerned about how this is going to play into the overall Internet of Bodies, Internet of Humans, Internet of Bio-Nano Things, transhumanist agenda. I don't think we should just be Luddites and like, oh my God, this is technology I don't understand, so let's be all afraid of it, because again, there could be some potential use cases of it, but we should absolutely be skeptical. Now, this part I think is important. I found this program when I was doing my research as well. It's called APEC. And this is the program that this woman was involved in, focusing on next generation vaccines. Launched in September 2024, $204 million initiative uses artificial intelligence to design antigens that target entire viral families, if you believe such things exist. ARPA-H argues that these viruses pose serious threats to global health, causing pandemics, cancers, concerns, and chronic illness. And they contend that the current vaccines are not enough. So we need targeted genomic vaccines. And she was involved in promoting and supporting APEC-X, this program. And, so this brings it down to the question, is this Make America Healthy again? I would say not. I would say this is further advancing the biotech biosecurity agenda. And I want to point out that as well, I was reporting on this back in TLAV. When was this? During the Biden administration, September 2022, this article titled, "The Biden Administration Embraces Technocracy with the Promise of $2 billion in Funding for the Bioeconomy." And then here's another one. Here, I got to find this article. I wrote about a company called Ginkgo Bioworks. Let me see if this will come up real quick. And ARPA-H was directly, let me see if this comes up. ARPA-H right here. Biden appointed what they call the ARPA-H first director. And this is all kind of tied in. So, I'm not saying just because Biden created the program, it makes it automatically bad. As I said, it was actually a program that was initiated or at least promoted by Donald Trump originally. But this is where it gets interesting and kind of ties into some of my previous reporting. Like I said, this article here on Biden was from September 2022, and I talked about ARPA-H and this woman named Renee Wegrzyn. I don't know how to pronounce her name. And she was the first director of ARPA-H, and she has been involved with promoting mRNA vaccines, the whole thing. And here's a little bit about from Whitney, ARPA-H. Whitney was warning that its creation would mean, quote, "If ARPA-H HARPA is approved by Congress and ultimately established, it will be used to resurrect dangerous and long-standing agendas of the national security state and its Silicon Valley contractors, creating a digital dictatorship that threatens human freedom, human society, and potentially the very definition of what it means to be human." I looked into this Renee woman, who is the first head of ARPA-H, and she is the kind of person that they would want in there, but it's also, you can see the transhumanist element. She's a PhD in molecular biology, bioengineering. She spent 4.5 years as a program manager in DARPA's Biological Technologies Office. She managed genetic engineering, gene editing projects focused on biosecurity, public health. Her DARPA portfolio included the living foundries, safe genes, preemptive expression of protective alleles and response elements, and detect it with gene editing programs. She also worked for another DARPA-inspired agency, Intelligence Advanced Research Projects Agency, and she advised another one called ARPA-E, and they obviously supported her analysis. And she was also currently vice president at Ginkgo Bioworks, which is a rising star in the biotech field. They describe themselves as an organism company. And as VP, she was focused on applying synthetic biology to outpace infectious disease, including COVID-19, through biomanufacturing, vaccine, and diagnostic biosurveillance innovation. So then that led me to write, as you can see here, about Ginkgo Bioworks and how they tie into transhumanism. And I did this whole article here shortly after that. Who is Ginkgo Bioworks and how do they fit into the biosecurity and transhumanist agenda? This was actually from 2021, so I wrote this one first. I will include these in the show notes because I think they're relevant. If you want to really understand more about ARPA-H, understand more about this whole synthetic biology, gene printing. This goes into like CRISPR. This goes into mRNA vaccines. This goes into Stargate, cancer shot, moonshot, cancer vaccines. I don't think this is a good move. Now, we can't say for certain what this lady is involved in because, we've only got a little bit of her history, but I can tell you this, that the more I looked into it, I was able to find that she's definitely been there's some clips of her speaking on DARPA TV and at different DARPA events where she's specifically advocating for genomic vaccines and things of that sort. So I don't think this is a good move. I wouldn't class this as MAHA. Maybe you guys have a different view, but that's what we got for today on that front. Now, our final story of the day, just closed one of the links. Our final story of the day relates to a story that I first reported on back in 2015, if you can believe it. Here's an archived version of my article at Activist Post. I wrote this March 14, 2015, Chicago's untold story of widespread child abuse in state facilities. And this is kind of crazy. It's sort of tied in one way. Like, this is me kind of picking up another thread that I had a source reach out to me and tell me about these facilities. But this ties into a bigger story in Chicago. You guys might remember this. This was these detention centers that were first revealed back then in 2015. I mentioned this earlier in the show, black sites. So in the post 9/11 world, people were being kidnapped, what they got to call rendition, just the way they call torture, enhanced interrogation. Make no mistake, rendition was kidnapping people and taking them to black sites, to private prisons around the world, where many times they were never seen from again, or they would be tortured and abused for years and never charged with a crime. Well, in 2015, we learned about this situation. This is an article from the Anti-Media. Shout out to the Anti-Media. Going back to 2015, this was written by Carrie Wedler. Chicago police caught disappearing people into secret CIA-style detention center. Now, you guys might not remember this, but this was first reported by The Guardian. The Chicago police are operating detention facilities that mirror the CIA's black sites. According to The Guardian's investigation, the process at Homan is as follows. Suspects are taken to the facility without being booked or processed. And they say that this is a secret among the attorneys, where they regularly make police station visits. If you can't find a client in the system, odds are that they're in this Homan facility. They are interrogated without lawyers present, and in fact, lawyers are often refused entry. Those who have gained access to the clients claim that the police still withhold information about the suspects. They are not read their Miranda rights or offered due process, and they're essentially taken without any contact to the lawyers, and they're held in this facility in Chicago. This man, Brian Jacob Church, who was acquitted of terrorism charges after the 2012 NATO summit, he was held there. He's apparently the only detainee who spoke to The Guardian after fear of police retaliation. He said he was being held behind a floor to a ceiling chain link cage with his left wrist cuffed to the bench and ankles cuffed together for 17 hours. His lawyers were only able to find him after putting in calls to the mayor's office. And he said it brings to mind interrogation facilities they use in the Middle East. The CIA calls them black sites, a domestic black site. When you go in, no one knows what happened to you. This was the case of a 15-year-old boy who was taken to Homan under suspicion of involvement in a shooting. A sympathetic sergeant told his mother his location, but when the attorney arrived, she was denied entry for over an hour. She says officials told her, well, you can't just stand here taking notes. This is a secure facility. There are undercover officers and you're making people very nervous. The boy was not released until 12 or 13 hours later. He was not charged. And this is, you can kind of see the facility, the building, like people were able to locate where this was actually at. And, there's some video right there for those watching on the screen. It's in this giant nondescript warehouse. It looks sort of abandoned. You would never think that, oh my God, they're holding people in there, without charge, having them chained up against the wall. There's no sign that it has anything to do with anything. So that was back in 2015. Just for those who'd never heard of this, needed a refresher, the Anti-Media reported on it. I reported on it, and how this ties into child abuse and in different facilities where, while they've got some people being held in Homan Square, they've also got these kids being held in these residential centers. So this was all covered in the past. So now here's the update from the Free Thought Project. DOJ knew about and used notorious Homan Square black site. It wasn't just Chicago police operating the off-the-books holding facility, the site of alleged torture and days-long unlawful detention. So again, we talked about this in 2015. But nobody was ever investigated. The Department of Justice under Obama and under Trump and under Biden, nobody has chosen to investigate this to find out what the heck the Chicago Police Department were up to. And more than likely, guys, these sort of facilities exist in other cities with other police departments. The DOJ's failure to specifically examine the alleged abuses at Homan left onlookers scratching their heads. Investigating the CPD's use of force was important. But why wouldn't the DOJ also investigate the Homan Square facility given the severity of the allegations? One of the main figures pushing for a DOJ probe was then Cook County Commissioner Richard Boykin, who sent letters to the department asking them to investigate the facility. When he was asked whether he received an explanation as to why they did not investigate it, he said, "I did not," which is surprising. And this report is coming from Noir News. They've examined an element of this story that provides important context. The Department of Justice was inside Homan Square all along, well aware of its use for extrajudicial detention, conducted its own interrogations in the facility, and it's implicated in at least one of the most egregious abuse cases, that of Angel Perez. Perez alleged that Chicago officers took him to Homan Square and pressured him to act as a cooperating witness in an investigation of alleged drug dealer Dwayne Payne. Namely, the officers wanted Perez to set up a drug purchase with Payne. Perez said he was taken to a room on a second floor of Homan Square, handcuffed to a bar, and placed in ankle shackles for several hours. Officer allegedly threatened to plant evidence on him and send him to Cook County Jail to be raped by gang members. After he refused to cooperate in the investigation, he says that he was physically and verbally tortured by the officers for hours and that they refused to grant him access to a lawyer. One of the officers told Perez, "I hear that a big black N-word dick feels like a gun up your ass." Wow. Then an officer inserted a cold metal object, believed to be one of their officers' revolvers, into his rectum, causing him severe pain and humiliation. He relented and agreed to buy heroin for the officers. And importantly, his lawsuit and the Guardian's reporting on it solely implicated the CPD, but Noir News has discovered a 2022 court order reveals that the investigation that resulted in his detention and torture wasn't just the Chicago police, but it actually was a joint investigation with the U.S. Attorney's Office. The U.S. Attorney's Office is part of the Department of Justice. So the Department of Justice, which never investigated this Homan Square domestic black site in Chicago, they were already a part of this prosecution of this guy, this crazy, forced him to go be an informant via the U.S. Attorney's Office. He was eventually charged alongside with other defendants, and as the DOJ announced in a 2013 press release, the DOJ's Department of Drug Enforcement Administration was also involved in the investigation. If his allegations are true, and surveillance footage shows him being released, shows him being escorted into Homan through a door titled prisoner entrance, the DOJ built the case against Payne, and at part at least via torture. But if his allegations are false, this case alone indicates, even if his allegations are false, this shows that the DOJ was aware of and implicated in the use of the Homan Square facility, where multiple other individuals report being physically abused and illegally detained without access to an attorney. Moreover, the Department of Justice failed to disclose to the public its awareness of and involvement with Homan Square when activists and elected officials pressured the DOJ to investigate the facility. So it's no wonder they never investigated it, because they were involved in the case in one way or another. And this is the sort of thing, guys, that really disturbs me and keeps me up at night in relation to what we're seeing from Donald Trump and the taking away of people. Right now, they're shipping them to El Salvadorian, prisons for violent gang members. But how long will it be before one of these types of facilities in Homan Square or elsewhere is used to house people who are critical of Israel? Because that's what this is all coming back to. And I mean, not to get too off track here, but that's happening in the United States. For those who think America's the land of the free and this kind of stuff will never happen, it's already happening. They already have people being rounded up, being treated like criminals, being held without access to trial, being tortured, at least mentally. The whole experience is torture, but physically in some cases. And it's not just happening in Guantanamo Bay. It's not just happening in black sites in Poland and other parts of the world. It's happening in Homan Square. And more than likely, as I said, this is not an isolated incident. There are probably other examples of this taking place. We need to push back. You need to wake up. You need to realize that these people do not have your best intentions at heart, my friends. They don't care about you. And the sooner we can recognize that, the sooner we're going to be in a better place. If we can get past the false left-right paradigm, the false binary, and actually unite. I know it seems so far away, and I really have not much hope or optimism for it. People of the left and the right and the center coming together. I know that many of you thought that that's what was happening with Trump's election, that we're building a coalition. We got Tulsi Gabbard and RFK. We're bringing together all the disaffected Democrats and others. But that is a false awakening. That's not the real awakening. The real awakening is me and you and everybody recognizing that politics isn't the answer, that politicians aren't the answer, and that the only hope of saving the United States, and not only the United States, but the world, and helping people come together to build a better world that we know is possible, the only way that's going to happen is us choosing to come together and reject politics and reject false solutions. I highly encourage you guys to check out the Exit and Build 45-day challenge, theconsciousresistance.com/EXB for Exit and Build. Check it out. Learn more about the solutions. Dive into that. Get involved in your community. Push back against tyranny when you see it. Don't just complain on the internet. Don't just think that slacktivism on the internet and tweeting or, doing this sort of thing is real work. I'm sorry, my friends. It's not. Ratioing somebody on the internet isn't a big thing. It's not a huge deal. It doesn't impact the real physical realm. Yes, we can use the internet. We can use social media. We can use these tools to reach people. But at the end of the day, we need to get out into the streets when necessary. We can't allow tyranny to rise in our own backyards. And even though I don't live in the United States full time anymore, I'm in Mexico. I go back to Texas regularly. My family's there in Texas. And what happens in the United States does impact other parts of the world. So if American citizens themselves, if the American people themselves can't stand up and say, when injustice is happening, it's wrong. It doesn't matter if it's happening to somebody who I disagree with. It doesn't matter if it's happening to somebody with a different political opinion. Wrong is wrong is wrong. And we need to stand up against it at every turn. Otherwise, there will be more black sites. There will be more people being shipped off to El Salvadorian prisons or elsewhere. And right now you might say, well, they're illegal, Derrick. I don't care about that. Or they're allegedly a gang member. I don't need to see the evidence. I'm just going to take Trump's administration's word for it. But eventually, it will be you, or it'll be somebody you care about. And then what will you do? It's the old adage that first they came for somebody I didn't care about and I did nothing. Then they came for another person I didn't care about and I did nothing. And eventually they came for me, or they came for my kind, or people who share my views. And at that point, it was too late. We cannot allow that to happen, my friend. The fact that these sort of injustices are taking place in the United States, the fact that pedophiles go free and that people who are abusing children are being allowed to get off the hook and walk freely, and that the government is rounding people up under very, little evidence, if any at all. And there's black sites in America, and we could go on, and digital IDs are coming. And where is the resistance? I don't see it. Where are all the conscious resistors? Where are the people who recognize what's happening and need and have a desire and a need and a want to stand up and to say, no, we won't take this. No, we're not going to stand by and allow the human spirit to be suppressed under this psychopathic, transhumanist, anti-human eugenicist agenda. We're going to stand up and claim our power, stand strong in our minds and our hearts, and stand together with our brothers and sisters and say that we will not give in. We will not give up, and we will not be subsumed by the AI transhumanist technocratic machine. Until that happens, my friends, it's going to keep advancing. I really appreciate everybody who's been here with me tonight. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of The Conscious Resistance Live. I just want to remind you again, if you want to support my work, you can go to theconsciousresistance.com, theconsciousresistance.com/invest. There's a link to all of our Substack, our Buy Me a Coffee, and to my crypto wallets if you want to support. Thank you again to everybody who supported our crowdfunding campaign. Because of you guys, we've raised more than $10,000, and that is going to help us make the best final episode of the Pyramid Power that is as possible. And with that said, it's time for me to get back to my writing, back to my work. I appreciate each and every one of you. Please share my content, guys. I'm doing my best to bring you hard-hitting journalism, but it only goes so far if you don't share. When you see me out on other channels, share those interviews. When you see my clips coming out, share those interviews. When you see my articles, share those articles. Please, I need your support to send the message out as far and wide as possible. I'm working my butt off to give you guys accurate information, to provide solutions so we can continue to build the better world that we know we need and that we know is possible, not only for us, but for the coming 7 generations and beyond. So please, my friends, if you can, share my work, get it out there. And with that, we're going to end with a brand new music video like we always do. This one just came out today. It's called Energy Ball. It features Sahida Absara, who is the wife of Dub FX, who is an amazing, talented artist that we played on this show, and I'm going to get to go on tour with him very soon. You'll hear about that. And it also features Elias Clay, my good friend and longtime truth activist, conscious rapper, just beautiful human being all around. And these two women are super powerful and strong. This is a message of empowerment that so many of us need, especially the young brothers and sisters. So check them out over on YouTube and Spotify. You can look up DubFX, Sahida Absara, Elias Clay. I'll put the link in the show notes. Enjoy this, my friends. Until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.
Sometimes you're giving all the vibes, so you never get it back. And you can't put your finger on it, the flow is out of whack. You're feeling kinda strange in the funky interchange. Feel a little insecure, was it something that you said? You feel depleted, defeated, the garden isn't weeded. Feel there's something missing, so you give it what is needed. Some water, some juice, a little fertilizer. Levy up the conversation, little appetizer. It's the energy ball, the energy ball, the energy ball, the energy ball. If you're passing it on, I'll be passing it back. I'll be sharing all the energy and holding it all. It's the energy ball, the energy ball, the energy ball, the energy ball. If you're passing it on, I'll be passing it back. I'll be sharing all the energy and holding it all. Not all people are your people, flying like an eagle. Rise above the power, play your royal and your regal. Get a bird's eye view over mountains and valleys. Use your third IQ through the streets and the alleys. You'll be alright with your hindsight, delight in hindsight. Pull back your shoulders so your heart can shine bright. Just stay open, stay kind. In your heart and your mind, watch the energy ball, the energy ball, the energy ball, the energy ball. If you're passing it on, I'll be passing it back. Sharing all the energy, your heart in it all.
Thank you, I take the energy ball and have a ball with it. I share the glow cause you know I want us all lifted. Rising with my sis, yes, that's a gift. Feeling safe with my brothers, enough to share, that's a gift. Let the energy uplift, dissolve and assist. On a mission well equipped to raise consciousness. Pure energy and frequency, yes, the vibe's lit. Phase shift in my spaceship with a plot twist. But the energy's steady even when the fog's thick. Jedi mind tricks in the mist, hard and full effect. Take the ball, what's next? Live and direct when my energy is focused with the love and intent. See what happens with the full sand. All in, concentrate the energy and visualize the wind. Grounded in an essence, firmly rooted deep within. All in, see what happens, full sand.
Don't give away your power, finding love in the wrong places. Acceptance isn't necessary, but loving yourself is. It's revolutionary. Don't give away your power, finding love in the wrong places. Acceptance isn't necessary, loving yourself is. It's revolutionary. Don't give away your power, finding love in the wrong places. Acceptance isn't necessary, but loving yourself is. It's revolutionary. Don't give away your power, finding love in the wrong places. Acceptance isn't necessary, but loving yourself is. It's revolutionary.
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.